10 to 12 billion years old. Read that number again. 10 to 12 billion years old. The universe itself is only 13.8 billion years old, which means the object currently leaving our solar system at 60 kilometers per second faster than it arrived formed when the universe was still in its infancy, before our sun existed, before Earth had a single atom to its name, before multicellular life had appeared anywhere on this planet. This object was already traveling through interstellar space, and 2 days ago, it passed within 100,000 kilometers of Jupiter's gravitational boundary, used the planet's gravity to accelerate, and left. Nobody launched an intercept mission. Nobody held a press conference, and the data that explains exactly what happened is being quietly published in fragments across institutional servers, while the official narrative from NASA and ESA says almost nothing. They told us it was a comet, a distant flyby, a natural object passing through, case closed. But when you actually dig into the peer-reviewed preprint data released between March 16th and today, piece by piece across 4 different institutional archives, the picture that assembles is not natural. It is not random. And the reason the major space agencies are staying quiet is because they found nothing. It is because what they found does not fit inside any category we currently have words for. Let me show you exactly what the data says, and I want you to pay attention to the order of these findings, because that order matters more than any single piece of evidence on its own. On March 18th, a study appeared on Research Square, a preprint server, analyzing James Webb Space Telescope spectral data collected shortly after 3 Atlas passed perihelion, its closest point to the Sun. The study measured deuterium ratios and carbon isotopes in the material being released from the object. What they found stopped the researchers cold. The chemical signatures indicated that this object formed in an environment colder than 30 Kelvin and extraordinarily metal poor. Those specific conditions do not describe our solar system 4.5 billion years ago. They describe the early Milky Way 10 to 12 billion years ago, before our sun ignited, before the stellar nucleosynthesis processes that seeded the galaxy with heavy metals had produced enough material to build rocky planets. This object predates our entire solar system by more than 5 billion years. It has been traveling through interstellar space for longer than complex life has existed on Earth, and it is only now, in the year 2024, passing through our neighborhood for what may be the first and only time any instrument built by human beings will ever have a chance to observe it. Now think carefully about what that age actually implies. If 3 Atlas is genuinely 10 billion years old, it has spent 10 billion years exposed to cosmic ray bombardment, 10 billion years of temperature cycling between 3 Kelvin in deep interstellar space and the extreme heat of solar perihelion, 10 billion years of gravitational perturbations from passing stars, molecular clouds, and the galactic tide itself. For complex organic molecules, delicate chemical structures, anything resembling organized chemistry, to survive that journey intact, they would need to have been shielded, actively, deliberately, structurally shielded. The minimum shielding depth required to protect organics from a billion years of cosmic ray exposure is approximately 10 meters of overlying material. For 10 billion years, that number scales far beyond what random accretion processes produce in cometary nuclei. The shielding required is not a coincidence of natural formation. It is a shell, a structured, layered, protective shell around whatever is inside. And when you have a 10 billion year old object traveling through interstellar space with a protective shell preserving complex organics and showing isotopic signatures that include something that has no business being there at all, you arrive at the question that nobody in the mainstream coverage is asking: where did the nickel come from? Before perihelion, spectral analysis of the gas cloud surrounding 3 Atlas detected nickel, not traces, not background noise, concentrations, and the nickel to iron ratio in that coma was wrong in a way that is very difficult to explain naturally. In comets formed in our solar system, if nickel appears at all, it shows up alongside iron in ratios that match primordial solar system composition. The ratio reflects what was available when the object formed, but 3 Atlas showed nickel concentrations higher than iron. That specific ratio, nickel dominant over iron, is associated not with primitive solar system material, but with refined industrial nickel alloys, with processed metal, with material that has been separated and concentrated by a deliberate metallurgical process. And here is where the contradiction becomes impossible to resolve inside a natural framework. If 3 Atlas formed 10 to 12 billion years ago in a cold, metal-poor early galaxy, as the deuterium and carbon isotopes
isotope data explicitly states, then there should be almost no heavy metals at all. The early Milky Way had not yet produced the products of stellar nucleosynthesis in sufficient quantities to seed forming objects with significant iron or nickel. Heavy metals were genuinely rare, so you have two datasets sitting directly next to each other in the published literature that cannot both be true simultaneously. Under a natural origin model, either the isotope data is wrong and the object is not 10 billion years old, or the nickel was not part of the original structure. It was introduced after formation from a different source by a different process. Something happened to 3 Atlas between the moment it formed in the cold metal-poor early galaxy and the moment it entered our solar system, and whatever happened left a chemical fingerprint that looks less like geology and more like manufacturing. And then the organics started releasing. After perihelion, as the sun's heat penetrated the outer layers of the object, complex carbon-based molecules began outgassing from the coma in a sequence that the observing teams found unique. Methane first, then water, then increasingly complex organics emerging in what the observing teams described as a layered sequential release, not the chaotic simultaneous outgassing you see from a typical comet being heated unevenly by the sun. A sequence, as if the release was structured, as if thermal cycling was unlocking a series of sealed compartments, one after another, each one opening only after the previous layer had been sufficiently heated, each one releasing its contents in order before the next layer became accessible, as if something frozen for billions of years was very slowly, very precisely opening. Now let's talk about March 16th, because the trajectory data published by the Minor Planet Center tells a story that is sitting in public view and nobody in the mainstream media is connecting the dots. 3 Atlas approached Jupiter at a distance of 53.6 million kilometers. That number is not arbitrary. Jupiter's Hill sphere, the precise boundary region where Jupiter's gravitational influence dominates over the Sun, extends to 53.5 million kilometers. 3 Atlas passed 100,000 kilometers inside that boundary, close enough for Jupiter's gravitational field to fully interact with the object, close enough to gain significant velocity, far enough to avoid gravitational capture, and it exited 60 kilometers per second faster than it arrived. 60 kilometers per second. That is not a minor perturbation. That is a massive velocity boost extracted with extraordinary geometric precision from Jupiter's gravitational field. In orbital mechanics, this maneuver has a name: a gravity assist, a gravity slingshot. Voyager 1 used one. Voyager 2 used multiple. Cassini used one. New Horizons used one on its way to Pluto. Every single one of those maneuvers was planned by teams of engineers over years of computational work, calculating the precise approach angle, the precise closest approach distance, the precise velocity needed to extract the maximum energy from the planetary flyby and redirect the spacecraft onto exactly the desired outbound trajectory. 3 Atlas executed the same maneuver on the outbound leg, not on the inbound approach, where the geometry of arrival might offer some natural explanation. On the way out, as if it had somewhere specific to be and needed to accelerate to get there on schedule. And it gets more precise than that. Throughout its transit across the inner solar system, 3 Atlas showed non-gravitational accelerations, forces acting on the object that cannot be accounted for by the gravitational influence of the sun, the planets, or any known natural process. Sideways thrust, course corrections, subtle but measurable deviations from a purely ballistic trajectory. When researchers model outgassing from a comet as a source of non-gravitational acceleration, the thrust produced is inherently chaotic. Random jets firing from different locations on the surface as the sun heats different patches of volatile material produce deflections and perturbations in the trajectory. But the outbound vector of 3 Atlas after the Jupiter flyby is clean, precise, exactly on target, as if whatever was generating those non-gravitational forces applied them with deliberate control and then stopped at precisely the right moment to hit the Jupiter flyby geometry perfectly and exit on the exact desired vector. That is not outgassing, that is navigation. And then at 13:47 UTC, 13 minutes before 3 Atlas reached closest approach to Jupiter,